إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته and welcome to another session of Guidance for the Guided. We've now reached past the halfway point of Ramadan, and therefore, as I say, it's all downhill from now on, isn't it? Let me just send a message to the chaps know that we've gone live. We are live, so they can share the message with the others. Okay, that said, there was a couple of questions which have come up, and as I've said, because of the fact that I won't be doing a fiqh hour next week, then I'm looking at answering those questions now. Having said that, there may be, as we're preparing our itinerary, for next week, there may be a class in which there will be possibly a Q&A. We're looking at Tuesday evening, possibly, where there might be a Q&A. But let's see, inshallah, and then take it from there. Let's carry on with our normal status quo, which is to completely forget about answering those questions. So the question I needed to answer was, with regards to eating fruit from a house purchased with interest, what is the illah or cause for prohibition? Does the property itself become prohibited? Are there other implications? I think you need to listen carefully to how I answered this question. I did not say that it would be prohibited. So and this is why we have to be very careful in what we take from what a scholar says. So listen carefully to what he's saying, because he's very careful with the words that he selects. Okay, very careful with the words that he selects. So I suggest you go back, inshallah, and listen to the answer again, and you'll find that that's not what I said. The other question was, where are we? There you go. My mother has 1.5 tola of gold and 200 pounds. Does she have to pay zakat? Well, the amount of gold that would meet the nisab of 84 sort of grams is 7.5 tola. Okay. And 1.5 is considerably less than that, even if you add the 200 pounds. So there would be no zakat due if this was her only wealth that she had. Let me share this with the ladies group. Forward. And now we could start. So let's carry on with where we left off in our studies. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ وَرَحْمَتُهُ لَهَمَّ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ أَن يُضِلُّوكَ. Had it not been for the bounty of Allah upon you, and His mercy, لَهَمَّ طَائِفَةٌ, then indeed a group from amongst them would have decided to attempt to deviate you. Right? So this is addressed to the Prophet ﷺ, and shows that, the Prophet ﷺ's iman was solid, absolute solid, unshakable, unequivocal, no hesitation, no doubt, like a mountain was his iman. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that had it not been for the bounty of Allah and His mercy upon you, then a group would have attempted to deviate you. Now, if that is addressed to the Prophet ﷺ, then one can only imagine, our position in first of all, coming under attack by people who are trying to undermine our faith, and also about, even if they did attack us, how we'd be able to defend our faith. And we don't realize that because not all of us have this bounty of Allah and His rahmah around us, then that means there's many people attempting to deviate us. And we see that, don't we? Time and time again. We see it in the programs we watch. We see it on the social media. Anything that we're exposed to, or anything we are exposing ourselves to, is always undermining our faith, whether it is the phrases we use, whether it is our dress code, whether it is what we eat, our habits, our beliefs, so-called, what do you call them, trends, and all these preoccupations where there's always some new preoccupation to just keep you busy, keep you unaware, keep you deviated, keep you thinking about something else. So therefore, we have to take that. We're constantly being attacked by that. We're constantly being affected by that. We're constantly under attack, and when we're not realizing it because we've kind of become so numb to it. It's like, when people say, the skin on your face ages considerably more than skin anywhere else on your body. And the reason why the skin on your face tends to become more worn than anywhere else is because it's always exposed. It's always exposed to the sun. It's always exposed to the wind. It's always exposed to tiny, small pieces of fragments of sand and anything else that's floating in the sky. We tend to wash it more often than anything else. So it's being dried a lot more because as the water is evaporating, it's taking moisture from our face. And so because of all this exposure to our face ages faster than the rest of the skin around us, or it seems to be visibly more coarse, harder, shows the signs of age, wrinkles, whatever. Whereas, the rest of our body might be okay, it's the faces. And the reason for that is because of this continuous exposure. We don't feel it. We don't feel the air hitting on our face like it's a big thing. We don't feel the water evaporating from our skin as though it is a bad thing. We don't feel small specks of sand and dirt and dust and anything else for that matter striking our face. We don't really feel any of this. But over a period of time, over weeks, over months, over years, we see the effect of it. And that's exactly what the Iman is. That when a person's Iman is being eroded, when a person's Iman is being challenged, it is not challenged, in a very direct way. And I use the key phrase there, which is erosion. And if you look at erosion, you'll see, for example, that a pebble is absolutely smooth. A pebble that you find in a riverbed is smooth. You could run your hand over it and it's very smooth. And we're told by geologists that the reason that the way that happens because water has been flowing over this pebble for hundreds of years. And even though this pebble started off being probably a chunk of stone in a very irregular shape with bits sticking out and all sorts, but because this water's been running and running and running and running and running over the top, it has smoothed it completely. That has actually changed the shape of the stone itself. We look out, in the kind of mountainous regions and areas where there are large mountain structures and large stone structures, and we see these remarkable shapes in them. And we're told that again is erosion. That over a period of time, the wind has picked up small fragments of rock, small fragments of sand, and have been rubbing against these structures, these stone structures, and they've made these ajib, peculiar shapes out of them. The point I'm making is this concept of erosion also applies to a person's Iman. That it's not something that's going to hit him like that, where he's actually going to realize, oh, what was that? And, that really hit my Iman. And I wonder what state my Iman is in now. And he kind of, is conscious of it. But it will be this slow erosion until he ends up being a completely different shape, like that pebble in the water, ends up being a completely different shape than it was what it started off with. And that's because the pebble stayed in that environment. The pebble stayed in the water. Had somebody come along and took the pebble out or the rock out of the water and put it to one side, it probably retained its original shape. Had that piece of rock, had there been no wind in that area, then that piece of rock would have retained its shape. But because it didn't come out of that environment, the environment eroded it away until it changed it completely. And that's exactly what happens when there are groups of people who are absolutely clear that there are, people with faith, people with iman, and there are a problem. Some will come at it in a very strong way. What they will do is they will come in a very aggressive way. And naturally, our guard goes up then when people come and really challenge our faith. And even though our own iman might be slightly weak, as soon as somebody talks ill of our Prophet, ﷺ, we get upset, we get angry, and we naturally become defensive. When somebody ridicules our dress code, our eating habits, whatever, we naturally become defensive. But when somebody's a little bit more subtle and aren't as direct and are more, smart in their approach, then they slowly undermine our practices without us realizing it in a non-aggressive way, in a very subtle way. And that's because of the environment we're in. Now, remember, just going back to the verse itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, with regards to the Prophet alayhi salam, that had it not been for the bounty of Allah upon you, as in Ya Rasulullah, and his mercy, as in Allah's mercy, لَهَمَّ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ أَيُّضِلُّوكَ. There would be a group from amongst them who had decided, who had planned that they would deviate you. That they would deviate you. They would have planned to start to deviate you. They had the audacity and the boldness to think that they could deviate the Prophet ﷺ. The man who was actually receiving revelation, the man who was in close conversation with Jibreel ﷺ, they still felt they had the audacity to think that we can still deviate this person. Because that's the level of arrogance that a person who believes in himself or sets himself up as a god, that's the level of arrogance they possess. And now that's about the Prophet ﷺ. Now, if somebody has the audacity and the boldness and the absolute, ridiculous position of trying to think that they could undermine and deviate the Prophet ﷺ, then what do you think in this present day and age about the average person? When the average person isn't spending as much time in the masjid as he should, when the average person is not engaging with scholarship and with Islamic reading as much as he should, when the average person, rarely picks up the mushaf, as in the copy of the Quran, rarely picks out, when the average person hardly understands any of the words that Allah has spoken, when the average person hardly understands any of the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, how is he not going to be? And when the average person, unfortunately, is not practicing his acts of worship, which act as a defensive barrier, which acts as a shield, which acts as a protection against this erosion, how is he going to defend himself if a group are quite confident and they have the assets to do that? They have the financial assets, they control the media, they control the what we're viewing daily because they own them. If you look at who owns most of the largest corporations, they're not necessarily good people. So they're hell-bent, when I say good people, as in towards faith, they tend to take a very anti-faith approach. They're atheists, hard atheists, and they want to undermine religion because they see religion as something that's holding people back. Now, yes, there might be some types of religions, unfortunately, that are being led by charlatans and being led by, actors. There are people who are trying to take benefit from people, trying to fleece people, trying to get money out of people. Of course, unfortunately, people like that exist. Snake charmers and things of that nature. They exist. That's a reality. They even exist within Islam, unfortunately, because that's just the way it is. But the reality is that when a person truly seeks out good faith, then they'll find it. Allah SWT further says, وَمَا يُضِلُّونَ, but they do not deviate إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ, except themselves. They just don't harm it. They just don't realize it. وَمَا يَضُرُّونَكَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ, they cannot harm you in any shape or form. So if we can extend that from the Prophet ﷺ, because this was directly addressed to the Prophet ﷺ, if we can extend that, then also those people who are of sound iman, those people who associate themselves with the masajids, those people who associate themselves with ulama, those people who associate themselves with learning and also bringing those things into practice in their day-to-day lives, the way they run their houses, how they are towards one another, how they do business, and all the rest of it, then they can be protected. And those people who plot and plan against them, those plots and plans will backfire onto the very people who try to do it, as we see with as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet alayhi salatu وَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمْ. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed upon you the book and the wisdom. وَعَلَّمَكَ, and He has taught you مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمْ, what you did not know. So you have these skills, and these skills are the ones, and this knowledge is the one which will act as a protection against these people. So those of us who have knowledge of the book, those of us who have wisdom, those of us who have been taught something which they did not know before, because that's how you learn, every alim was a jahil, then they are protected. Again, if we extrapolate this conversation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is having, addressing it to the Prophet ﷺ, and we extrapolate that therefore anybody else who also receives the book, obviously we don't receive it directly, revelation does not come down upon us, revelation came down upon the Prophet ﷺ, but we have received revelation in its final form. And if we acquire hikmah, and we learn that which we did not know, then this will also be a means of protection for us as well. So like the Prophet ﷺ was protected, that no matter who tried to plan and plot against him, they had no impact on him. It did not affect him because he was protected. This was his source this was his shield. This was his armor. This was his spiritual strength that he gained from this. وَكَانَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ عَظِيمًا, and indeed the bounty of Allah upon you is great. So the Prophet ﷺ is reminded, and it's quite a intimate statement that Allah is making towards the Prophet ﷺ, because in this case, you notice it's addressing him so many times directly. He says, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ أَيْ يُضِلُّوكَ وَمَا يَضُرُّونَكَ وَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ وَعَلَّمَكَ تَعْلَمْ وَكَانَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ. So in 7 places there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly addresses the Prophet ﷺ in second person, in you. And that's in a short 2 ayats, no more than 2 ayats. In that short 2 ayats, actually it's 1 ayat. I correct myself. In that 1 ayat alone, Allah addresses the Prophet ﷺ 7 times. 7 times. So this shows this close affinity. And we talk in the ulama to remind us about the love which exists between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ, and is regarded as the beloved. And this shows the great ni'mats that were placed upon the Prophet ﷺ, the great gifts which were given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes, because we become too kind of engrossed in the practicalities of what we're learning, we forget this relationship that existed. We forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was protecting the Prophet ﷺ. We forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave great favors to the Prophet ﷺ. We forget that he was protected from any error. He was protected from any misguidance. He was protected from because you've got to remember, the Prophet ﷺ stood alone virtually against all evil, against all darkness, because at that time the Prophet ﷺ was the only shining light. Of course, when his companions joined him, then they shared in that. But really, he was the only one at that time stood up against falsehood, stood up against false deities, stood up against the wrongness that existed on the earth and the injustice which existed on the earth. Like we see now, unfortunately, many injustices being carried out on the earth, many people's lives being taken, for no real reason. And the value of people's lives is as though it's worthless. That there's a person doesn't feel any remorse at taking a human life and doing it in such a way and unfortunately, the way war has gone now, that it's just like a computer game. And these are humans being taken. These are people, these are mothers, these are daughters, these are sons, these are fathers, these are people who are grandchildren, these are people who are grandparents. They all have relationships, they all have families, and they're being destroyed for no reason whatsoever, apart from being in the wrong place or because of the greed of a very few people that want more than they can ever spend in their whole lives. But the greed won't stop. They want more. They want more. And this appetite is insatiable. It is not satisfying. It will only be satisfied when that person lands in the soil, and the soil itself satisfies him when he consumes it. لا خير في كثير من نجواهم إلا من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس. There is no good in majority of these private chit-chats, these private conversations, these secret talks, except in which you order a person to give sadaqah, or you're talking about some good act, or you're trying to bring some reconciliation between people. Meaning the majority of these chit-chats that go on when people are kind of looking around is either they're doing somebody's ghiba, they're ridiculing somebody, they're planning something bad to do, they're going to do something wrong and they don't want people to be aware of it. Most private conversations, most secret conversations. That's why people, one shouldn't have to hide one's passcode to their phone. Why? Why would a person hide their passcode? Of course, you'd hide it from the average person, but I mean from your own family members. What are you hiding? Similarly, a person wouldn't hide and have private conversations, have a secret another phone and things like that. For what purpose? There's always, whenever there's secrecy, whenever there's concealment, whenever there's hidden, whenever there's all this, there's usually, because unfortunately there's greater sin behind it. Because very rarely in secrecy is there good. Very rarely. Whenever there's secrecy, generally speaking, it is bad. Somebody's concealing something. Somebody's trying to, fool somebody. Somebody's trying to take advantage of somebody. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in the majority of these private conversations, there is no good in them whatsoever. He then makes an exception, but the exception is a minority. And that is when you're encouraging somebody to give sadaqah. Now, if you pull somebody over because you don't want to embarrass him, maybe. Yeah, you don't want to embarrass him because you're telling him to do something, you're advising him. And therefore, that also tells us that advice should normally be given in privacy. Unless, of course, you don't really want this person to act on your advice, but you're just having a go at him. But if you genuinely want somebody to act on your advice, then pull them into privacy. Call them and say, brother, can I have a word? You keep talking to me that there's all sorts going on in your life, that there's this happening, there's that happening, there's this going on. Look, there's this project. Why do you give some sadaqah? Sadaqah will, tutfi'un nar, it puts out fires. It puts out harm. Sadaqah acts like a shield. It deflects any harm that's coming your way. But if you don't give the sadaqah, then how is that harm going to be deflected? The harm is going to come your way. Furthermore, is whenever you're going to give him some advice, ma'ruf, you're giving him some advice. So give that advice in privacy. Don't give that advice in public, because if you give that advice in public, then your intention wasn't to give advice. Your intention was to challenge him. Right? Give the advice in privacy. And if that person is not taking your advice, well, it doesn't matter to you because the advice you're giving him was for his benefit. You weren't giving him that advice for your benefit. You were giving that advice for his benefit. He doesn't want to take it. That's fine. Of course, there are times, let's just say there's an organization or a person who is a public person that people are going to, and you become aware, unfortunately, that he's doing something wrong. But that would mean that you are senior to this person, because how would you know that they're doing something wrong? So you'd become aware that this person is doing something wrong. So you'd approach him in privacy and you'd say, look, brother, you're doing this. This is not right. You're deceiving people. People are coming to you. You're telling them that, if they give you some money, then you will give them a ta'weez, and with that ta'weez, they'll get better. You don't know if they'll get better. There's no guarantee of that. And you're taking 100, 200, 300 pounds off people. And these are simple people. And they're going away thinking that all their lives problems are going to disappear overnight. And they're not. And they're already financially in a difficult position, and you continue to take advantage of them. So don't do that. And you give him advice again, and you give him advice again, and you give him advice, and he's not heeding your advice. And he's thinking, well, you're not going public anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Keep talking. That shows that this person is not actually going to be affected by advice. So now when you make a public statement, you're not giving advice. You are saying, look, there is an issue with this brother. I would like the senior ulama to engage with him. These are my claims, and I would like to be looked at. Before even that's done, it's better for that person to go to the ulama and say to the ulama that, look, this is the case, this is what I have, and let the ulama decide how they wish to take those matters forward. But if for whatever reason this person has no access to ulama, then that is the best way forward. And then at least that person can challenge this statement that you've given. And if it's a false statement, that person can come forward and give evidence to say this is a false statement. But obviously one has to be very careful that they don't make slanderous, libelous statements online. Oh, islahim bayna nas, or you're trying to make good between people. So, there's two brothers who don't get on, or two sisters who don't get on, or a father and a son, or a father and daughter, or a mother and son don't get on. So you go to the mother, okay, and speak to her in privacy and say good things that her son is saying about her. It might not be 100% accurate, but it's sort of 50% accurate, and a little bit of embellishment, a little bit of massage. And just so that the heart of the mother, it feels good towards her son. And then likewise, you go to a son and say good things that his mother is saying about him. Again, it might be 50% fact and a little bit of embellishment, a little bit of salt and pepper, just to obviously make it more palatable. And slowly what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring love between the two. And eventually you set them in the right way, and mother and son meet up, and they've already forgiven themselves because it was just that stubbornness that they weren't, moving forward. And alhamdulillah, they deal with the issues, and that's it. So these are the three exceptions where some level of privacy, some level of secrecy rather, is permitted. Otherwise, generally when someone is being very secretive, when somebody's concealing things, hiding things, panicking when you pick their phone up, whatever, then unfortunately there is problems. There are problems because there's only a minority. وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ فَسَوْفَ نُؤْتِيهِ أَجْرًا عَظِيمًا. And whomsoever does that, meaning these three things, amar bis-sadaqa, or ma'ruf, or islahim bayna nas, if whoever does that, seeking the pleasure of Allah, then soon we will give him a great reward. Why? Why is he getting a great reward? Well, he's getting a great reward because he's not getting any public show for it. He's not getting any public recognition for it. He's not getting any public status or respect, because the only people who know of this private conversation is him and the person he's talking to. And of course, Allah knows. Nobody else knows. That's why people like giving advice in public, because it makes them feel good. It makes them respected amongst the people. That's why people give advice in public. It makes them feel smarter. It makes them think that they're better. Whereas doing things in private, there's no show. There's no limelight. There's no, there's no name up in lights. It's concealed. It's hidden. Hence the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever does that, seeking the pleasures of Allah, then soon we will give him a great reward. So continue to be secretive in these areas. وَمَن يُشَاقِقِ الرَّسُولَ مِن بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. As for those who dispute with the messenger after the guidance has become clear to him, right? So the guidance has become clear to the person, and yet he still is in debate and dispute. And what does he do? وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. He decides to follow a path other than what the believers follow. Then we will turn him like the way he turned, and we will call وَنُصْلِهِ, and we will cause him to be burnt in Jahannam. And what an sa'at, what an evil, bad place that is as a destination. So if we extend this disputing from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam onto the ulama, onto people who are trying to move people towards deen, and this person is just argumentative for the sake of being argumentative on every point. Okay, even though the guidance is clear to him, but his stubbornness doesn't allow him to go forward. His stubbornness, his whatever you want to call it, his mizaj, his behavior, his characteristic, his arrogance, even though it's clear to him, he just still is, hell bent on having a debate, on disputing, on arguing. And then as a result of that, he ends up following not the path of the believers, because the path of the believers is the path upon which the guidance was. And he saw the guidance, but instead of agreeing to it when it was put forward to him and he became aware of it, he still carried on with his disputes. Then Allah SWT makes it quite clear that he is going to be then moving. If he's going to a path other than the believers, then the path of the believers leads to Jannah. The path of the believers leads to Jannah. Well, if you are adopting a path other than the believers, then your path can't lead to Jannah. That's why it is very scary when people adopt a path contrary to the ulama. If somebody adopts a path contrary to the ulama, then obviously we believe that the ulama are most likely, no guarantee for anybody, but out of generally human masses, the ulama are most likely the ones who are going to go Jannah. Okay, of course, some ulama are not going to go. We know that. They're going to have to go to Jahannam first and spend time there, as has already been discussed in some hadith and some of the other videos I've mentioned. But generally speaking, if we generalize, as Muslims, we believe that those people who are learned, those people who are scholars, and the senior they are in scholarship, that they are the ones who are going to go to Jannah. That's otherwise, why would we strive towards doing good? Why would we strive to become scholars? Why would we strive to learn the deen? Why would we strive to be guardians of this faith? Why would we strive to be propagators of this faith? There would be no benefit. There'd be no motivation if we thought, oh, we're going to end up in Jahannam as well. What's the point? I'd rather risk, flick the coin and think, khair, I've got as much chance as anyone else. Of course, we believe that those people who are close to Allah, that those people who are defenders of the faith, that those people who are propagators of this faith, those people who are helping us understand the deen in this modern world, that they are highly more likely to be going into Jannah. We must believe that. It would make no sense to us if we don't believe that. We must believe that the majority of those names of those authors behind me, if not all of them, are going to Jannah. We must believe that. The services that they've given towards deen, the voluminous books that they've written, explanation they've given, which is helping me and helping you and helping other people understand the deen better, understanding the verses of the Quran better, understanding the statements of the Prophet al-Islam better. Why then? We can then, once we understand things better, gives us the conviction to act on that understanding. Without understanding, we're sort of, not sure, I don't really get it. Okay, maybe not. But once we get it, then there's conviction behind doing it. Okay, now I get it. I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to understand this. So therefore, if the ulama path is one direction and we disagree with the ulama, okay, we disagree with them, we think we know better, we don't want to know, and we adopt a path other than the ulama, then think about it. If the ulama are going to take a path towards Jannah, and we have adopted another path, then how can our path also lead to Jannah? It's illogical. Right? It's illogical. If, for example, a group of people are going in one direction, right? So they're going north. We both want to go to London, right? We both want to go to London, and one group is heading north and the other group is heading south. Now, both groups are not going to end up in London. The group heading south is going to end up in London. The group heading north is going to probably end up in opposite to London. They're going to end up in Glasgow or Edinburgh or Falkirk or whatever. They're not going to end up in London. So the same point that's being made here is, if you differ with a group of people who are heading in a direction and you are contrary to them and you act contrary to them and you start heading in another direction, then your end destinations cannot be the same. Your end destinations must be completely opposite, which is why Allah says, وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. That is an evil destination. That is a sad destination that they will end in. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. And he has, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has mentioned this several times. He said, indeed, Allah does not forgive anybody who ascribes partners with him. However, he's more than happy to forgive anything which is less than that, لِمَن يَشَاءُ, to whoever he wills. So it doesn't mean that he will forgive anybody who does less than that. He will choose to forgive, and he will choose not to forgive, because nobody can compel Allah. Nobody can compel Allah. He is Allah. He will decide. He will choose. But when it comes to shirk, when it comes to ascribing partners with him, then he has made that statement already in the Quran, where he says that Allah will not forgive that person who ascribes partners with him. And we've already mentioned this several times, but I'll just quickly recap. We're not talking here about people, bowing down to statues or bowing down to idols or things of that nature. That is still in some existence, but less so. Less so. This is about any person who adopts a view towards something and he makes that something his God. And I'm not going to repeat it again, because of those of you who've been following and attending each lecture will be aware of that. And if you're not aware of that, then I suggest you watch an earlier guidance for the guided, in which I discussed that. وَمَن يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ ضَلَالًا بَعِيدًا. Because whoever ascribes partners with Allah, then indeed he has deviated, yani ضَلَالًا بَعِيدًا, very far deviation. A very far deviation. إِن يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ إِلَّا إِنَاثًا. They do not call men other than him except females. وَإِن يَدْعُونَ إِلَّا شَيْطَانًا مَرِيدًا. And they do not call except rebellious devils. لَعَنَهُ اللَّهُ. Allah has cursed them. And these are strong words. Allah has cursed them. And people think, well, if Allah has cursed them, why don't we see the effect of the curse? That's because we're not looking properly. Just because you see, our fortunate thing is, because of our own greed, we see people with money, so we think, they're not cursed. And when we see people who are poor, we say they're cursed, because unfortunately, we always look at things through our own financial lens. A person who's poor is not cursed, because a person who's poor might have a family, they have enough food to eat for the day, and they have iman in their hearts. How can they be cursed? You ask people, ask the guy who's in his own mansion, lives in a mansion where you can echo when he's talking, but the mansion is completely empty, apart from maids and servants. There's nobody else there, no family with him. He has no wife, because he's always paranoid that every time he gets married, she just wants half of his estate, so he doesn't marry. He doesn't have any children, because again, he's thinking they'll plot against me, kill me, and take my wealth. So he has no children, he has no wife, and he has bad health. And he's always not content. He's always being frustrated about trying to solve the big questions about who am I, where am I from? Now, isn't that cursed? Isn't that person cursed that he can't get out of this? Because unfortunately, like I said, we look at these things only through a financial lens, unfortunately, because we have been wired up in that way that success is wealth. And we're not wired up in that way that success is good health. We don't even look at good health as success. That I'm healthy, I get up in the morning, I can walk to do something, I breathe without support, and my organs are functioning properly. My eyesight means I can still see. Okay, I might have to wear glasses every now and then, but I can still see. I can drive, I can think, I can hear. Nobody thinks of this as wealth. I'd rather look at your bank account and say, oh, I've got 100,000, oh, I've got 50,000, oh, I've got 10,000. That's a measure of not being cursed or being favored. Nobody even looks at that. And then stuff for that, nobody even looks at Iman. Iman is like, the health is second, the spirituality is like third place. Nobody thinks, oh, mashallah, I'm praying regularly, alhamdulillah. I fasted the whole of Ramadan, 15 days, 16 days so far. I've attended Taraweeh, alhamdulillah. I've attended the guidance for the guided dars every day, alhamdulillah. I've recited the Quran for an hour a day. Nobody thinks of that as being favored by Allah. And that's because, unfortunately, we've changed our definition of how a person is favored and how a person is cursed. We only see a person being cursed is the one who has no wealth. Really, the person who is cursed is the one who doesn't have iman, because the wealth is going to go. Eventually, the health is going to go, but your amal will always stay with you. That's what is permanent. وقال لا تتخذن من عبادك نصيبا مفروضا ولأضلنهم ولأمنينهم ولآمرنهم فليبتكن آذان الأنعام ولآمرنهم فليغيرن خلق الله. So this is Shaitan speaking. Yeah, the Shaitan says, he says, indeed, لَأَتَّخِذَنَّ, indeed, I will take, and I've already talked about the noon muthaqqala, the lam, both come for emphasis. Shaitan makes a claim to Allah. Shaitan, his rage gets the better of him, and this is the problem when you have some knowledge. Okay, this is the danger of knowledge, is you become proud. Instead of that knowledge humbling you, instead of the knowledge being a weight on your shoulders and pushing your head down, it becomes a collar around your neck, and it pushes your neck up with your nose in the air. This is the dangerous of knowledge. This is why, again, if you read Imam Ghazali's books, especially his later books, and we did an Ayyuhal Walad series last year, I believe, in which Imam Ghazali rahimahullah realized that knowledge in itself can be very dangerous, because of the pride it gives somebody, especially when you start hearing the hadith and the ayahs of the Quran, which explains the virtues of the people of knowledge. And I just explained 5-10 minutes ago about the ulama. They've been given this great job, may yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fi din. Whoever Allah intends good for, he gives them deep knowledge of this deen. So those are the most favored people, meaning the most learned ulama are the most favored people by Allah. Allah has chosen them himself and given them his ilm in order for them to be exalted, so that he's going to, of course, give them reward as a result of it. So this naturally gets a person a little bit excited. It gets a rush of blood to the head. Now, hold on a second here. I think that's me, isn't it? I think the Prophet Islam is talking about me. The Quran is talking about me. That means, my pathway to Jannah is clear. I've got a direct access ticket with it. And this is exactly how Shaitan fell. So this is why knowledge has to come with what we call the haqiqah, yani the islah of the nafs. It has to be together. One cannot go without the other, because Shaitan didn't have that islah. He had great knowledge. He was muallimul malaika. He was the teacher of the angels. He had great knowledge. Nobody's questioning his knowledge, but unfortunately, his arrogance got the better of him. His lack of balance between his islah, which would have meant that even if you believe you are superior, but because Allah has ordered you, then you suspend your thinking. You put that to one side and say, okay, Allah has ordered me to do it. This is not my time to argue with Allah. It's an order. This is not my time to make a point that why should I bow down to Adam alayhi salam when he's made of soil and I'm made of fire. That's not this is not the time. This is not the time to say that when you let go of mud, then it naturally falls to the ground due to gravity, but the flames of a fire naturally rise to the sky. This is not the time. This was the time to obey. And this is what Islah does. It means that a person obeys, even if intellectually it might not absolutely make sense at that time. Is to obey and pray to Allah that he gives you the understanding, rather than saying, I'm not going to do the act until I have the understanding. No, flip it around. Say, I'm going to carry on doing this act and I'm going to pray to Allah to give me the understanding. And many of us who've been walking this path of ilm may not have understood something 10, 15 years ago, and we just thought, no, that's what it says in the Quran, that's what it says in the hadith, I'm going to do it. Khalas, I don't care. And then Allah opens the door to us 5, 10 years later, we think, I get that now. Now, if we'd been stubborn, or these people had been stubborn 10 years ago and not acted on it, then look at the danger. So Shaitan says, I'm going to take from your slaves, he says to Allah, a portion, a fixed portion. What am I going to do to them? وَلَأُضِلَّنَّهُمْ, I'm going to deviate them. Yeah? I'm going to deviate them, and I'm going to arouse in them false desires. False desires. Because remember, the shaitan is just a deceiver. He can't actually do anything to a person. He's the great magician. He's an illusionist. He cannot actually do anything. There is no reality or substance to his statements. They're just there to arouse and to confuse and to cause doubt. And he says, I will do that, and وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ, and without doubt I will order them. What will they do? فَلْيُبَتِّكُنَّ, so that they will cut the ears of animals. وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ, and also I will tell them, order them, فَلَيُغَيِّرُنَّ, and they will change the creation of Allah. And we're seeing that now, aren't we? You see some people with their tattoos. You know, there was something, I don't know where I saw it, and they like put horns in their heads, and they cut the tip of their nose off, and they put these, you know, metal things in, and tattoos. They slit their tongue. You know, they do some next level things to their face, and they actually think they're doing something good. They're doing something good. And then you see, you know, women as they're getting older, they get plastic surgery, or men, and they get plastic surgery thinking it will make them look better. And in fact, they turn themselves into hideous people as they age. And there's a constant, you know, narcissistic desire to want to keep changing the creation of Allah, not accepting it that, fine, I'm going to age. It's life. My face is going to start sagging. It's life. I'm going to start getting wrinkles. It's life. This is the reality of life. I will accept it. I will embrace it, as they say. That's just what it is. But I'm not going to change the creation of Allah. And now we have done, or humans have done, the greatest change in the creation of Allah, where we have this gender reassignment, where a person chooses to say, I no longer wish to be a woman, I wish to be a man, or a man says, I no longer wish to be a man, I want to be a woman. And these are all coming from the whisperings of shaitan. Nothing else. Nothing else. Many people, you know, commentators, social commentators say, look, well, this is some kind of mental illness. You know, if someone says, you know, especially when you get men sort of dressing up as women and wanting to be addressed as women, and when they're told what is a definition of a woman, they struggle to say what a definition of a woman is. And that even confuses people like us, because we're thinking, subhanAllah, I thought life was so straightforward. I knew what a man was and I knew what a woman is, and now I'm confused what is a man and what is a woman. If the definition, difference between a man and a woman is not biological, then what is it? It is not a state of mind of whether a person is a man or a woman. It's not a state of mind. Being a man or a woman is a biological definition based on a person's biological bits and pieces. That's what a man is and a woman is. It's not, you know, it's not a thought position. It's not how a person feels, right? Then you could feel anything, you know, you could feel like you want to be whatever. I'm not going to ridicule it, but you can see how this can lead to ridicule. And so now you're seeing these changes, and Shaitan promised, didn't he? He promised millennia ago when he was having his discussion with Allah that I'm going to do this, and we said, Fala, you know, every single statement he made, he had lam of emphasis and he had noon muthaqqala of emphasis. وَمَن يَتَّخِذِ الشَّيْطَانَ وَلِيًّا مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ خَسِرَ خُسْرَانًا مُبِينًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the other hand says, whoever takes shaitan as his guardian, as his supporter, as his advisor, as his representative, other than Allah, then indeed he has suffered a blatant, open loss. يَعِدُهُمْ وَيُمَنِّيهِمْ, and he promises them and he makes them think, you know, have desires. He arouses these desires with them. وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. But bear in mind that shaitan only promises or does not promise except deception. So it is deception. Now this woman has become a man through gender reassignment. And even when they become a man, they don't feel comfortable. They have regret. There have been so many people now trying to re-gender assign and go back to their original gender. There's many who've done all these strange things to their faces where they've cut their ears and slit their tongue in half and removed the tip of their nose and put horns in their head. And then they want to change and they can't change back. Because what was Shaitan promising them? Shaitan was promising them that if you do this, you will feel better. Shaitan promised them and said that if you do this, you will feel better. So do it. Do what your heart desires. It mentions that he arouses them within them desires. So I want to do this. I want to do that. And we get told, don't be held back by society. Don't let your parents hold you back. Don't let society hold you back. You want to do something? Just do it. Yeah, just go ahead and do it. And these are not real. These are not real. And then when a person doesn't achieve it, they become depressed. They become sad because people sold them a dream. Society sold them a dream. Now, if you want to be a footballer, you can do that. Can you? How many people actually become footballers? And if you look at the percentage of humans that become top footballers, it's such a small, tiny percentage that those people who have attempted it and didn't get there, they live kind of somewhat empty lives now for the rest of their lives because they feel they failed their first dream. And these are the things. And when we talk about these other things, whether it's gender reassignment, whether it's, physically deforming one's body or changing one's body, thinking that it will give them satisfaction, whether it's tattooing themselves from nose to toe, or whatever it might be. And the person thinks that I will feel better because that's really why they're doing it for. Why would anybody change anything with their body? The only reason a person would change anything in their body is because they feel that they will feel better when they make this change. So this change, they have been, Shaitan has whispered to them and said that it's this change that's doing it for you. It's this change. You're not happy because of this thing, which you need to change. And then when they make the change, they're not satisfied. Ulaika ma'wahum jahannam. For those their abode is Jahannam. Wala yajiduna anha mahisa, and they will not find any escape from there. والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات سندخلهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا. And then on the flip side, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the other group of people, and he does this throughout the Quran. He's never always negatively positioned. He balances the negativity with the positivity. And this teaches us when we give lectures that we shouldn't always be giving negative lectures. We should try to balance our negative lectures with positive lectures as well, because Allah SWT does not always give the negative side. If you do this, it's never always the stick. He balances it with the carrot as well. And he says, as for those people who believe and they do good deeds, then soon we will enter them into, and that famous little phrase, gardens underneath which rivers flow. They will stay in there for eternity. So if you feel that there's a certain body part which doesn't look right, if you get these strange whisperings in your head that you'd feel better as being of the opposite gender or something, or whatever it might be, whether it's a person's orientation or who they feel they're attracted to, whatever it is that's going through a person's mind, he comes to the Quran and understands whether these are sound requests, sound objectives, sound ambitions, or whether these are just whisperings of Shaitan. And if he considers these to be whisperings of Shaitan, then he seeks repentance in Allah, he seeks refuge in Allah, he asks for strength, he asks for conviction, he asks for istiqamah. Allah then promises him that in exchange for this test and trial that you will be put under, because a person is put under all forms of tests and trials. Some people are put under tests and trials of poverty. Some people are put under tests and trials of friends, all sorts, whatever we see in everyday life. Wa'ad Allah haqqan, the promise of Allah is the truth, which counter positions of Shaitan, because the promises of Shaitan are false. He said earlier, وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. Shaitan does not promise except deception. Okay? Except with deception. Whereas Allah, wa'adallahi haqqan, the promise of Allah is truth. وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ قِيلًا, and who is more truthful than Allah in his statement? Again, a rhetorical question. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. I took your advice and it really helped me with learning hadith. Wa alhamdulillah, barakallahu fiqh. May Allah increase your love for the hadith and benefit accordingly. لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا أَمَانِيَّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ مَنْ يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا يُجْزَ بِهِ وَلَا يَجِدْ لَهُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ وَلِيًّا وَلَا نَصِيرًا. And there is not in these desires which a person has, ambitions which a person has, nor the ambitions of the people of the book. Whoever does evil, he will be recompensed accordingly. وَلَا يَجِدْ لَهُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ وَلِيًّا, and he will not have from other than Allah as a protector, وَلَا نَصِيرًا, nor as a helper. وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِنَ الصَّالِحَاتِ, and whomsoever does a good deed, whether they are male or female. Okay, this is mentioned again. Why? Because there is no difference in gender. When people say, oh, Islam is male specific, it does not cater for the female. It does not. When it comes to what is right, as in the reward a person gets, Allah does not reward a woman less than he rewards a man. Allah will reward a man as much as he rewards a woman based on the tasks he's given them. So when, for example, the men were going for jihad, and the women said they're going to get more reward, those men, they're going for jihad. We don't go for jihad. That means we're going to have less reward. But then the Prophet ﷺ told them that when you go for Hajj, that is your jihad. Right? So different tasks for a man, different tasks for a woman. A man's tasks have been given specific to what he's been created for. Yeah, what his gender has been created for, what he's biologically created for, because of the hormones that he has within them. Testosterone, we know, we know has a certain impact on a human. It does make him more aggressive. It does make him more physically, wanting to get involved and, get into a fight if he needs to. It gives him more drive. It gives him more ambition. It gives him more, stock to carry on working and provide and be a protector. That becomes his natural mode. So that suits better being somebody who's going to have to go earn, defend the family, defend the honor, work hard, provide for his wife, provide for his children, be the family protector, da-da-da-da-da. And then a woman is made in a very different way, with her hormones such where she's showing more love, she's showing more care. We use a phrase, don't we? More motherly, more effeminate. We use those phrases. Because when you're raising a family, you need both. You don't just need this tough guy. You need the soft touch as well. You need the love and the care and the mercy. And that comes from the woman. So the roles are different because some of us, our souls are placed into male bodies and some souls are placed into female bodies. The roles are different, but whoever good deeds we do, even though our good deeds will be different, we will be rewarded accordingly. Your disc is almost full. Goodness me. Didn't expect to see that at 11 o'clock at night. So whoever does good deeds, whether they are male or female, who are mu'min, but the condition is that they are a believer. Right? Okay, you can go now. Why is that not going? Yeah. The condition is that they are a believer, which shows that if a person does good deeds and they are not a believer, they shouldn't expect reward for them. Even though Allah, out of his justice, will give them something, they should not expect reward. Many people ask the question, don't they? That, if a non-Muslim does something good, does that benefit him? Yes, it may benefit him. And that's only out of the justness of Allah. But will he be rewarded for it? No, he won't be rewarded for it. Because the condition to be rewarded is, how can you expect reward when you don't believe in the being that's giving out the reward? You don't believe in him. So why would you go up to a being that you don't believe in and say, can I have my reward? That's the ridiculous nature of the absurd nature of the statement. فَأُولَٰئِكَ يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ وَلَا يُظْلَمُونَ نَقِيرًا. So those individuals who do good, whether male or female and believers, they will enter into Jannah and they will not be harmed in any way, shape or form. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ دِينًا ممن أسلم وجهه لله وهو محسن واتبع ملة إبراهيم حنيفا. And who can be more sound in their faith than that person who submitted his face to Allah and he was good, and واتبع ملة إبراهيم حنيفا, and he followed the religion of Ibrahim the upright, the one who did not go left or right, the one who did not adopt a crooked path, but rather he adopted the straight path. وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, and for Allah is that which is in the heavens and that which is in the earth. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ مُحِيطًا, and Allah is over everything encompassing, meaning he has it fully aware of and understood. And that aptly brings us to the end of today's dars. Perfect timing, 1 hour and 15 seconds. And inshallah, we will have dars tomorrow. That is the plan. What is the date today? The date is the 6th, if I can see, 6/3/26. And inshallah, all being well, tomorrow is Saturday. So we will have a guidance for the guided tomorrow evening, and then one on Sunday evening. And Sunday evening, I will also try to share with you the itinerary, which hopefully should be complete for next week. And if you are in and around London, then I look forward to seeing you. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.